Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 12 in the discourse of Chodsheichem, which is the ninth discourse in the overall book, B'Shashay Gdimu. And this is class number 2 in chapter 35. The last class was both the last class number 4 in chapter 34 and class number 1 in chapter 35. And we are holding over here in the idea that he's explaining how just like there is that the whole concept is only when or light goes into vessels, when it reaches Atzilus, when it goes into vessels, that's when the various different sphirot and attributes which exist already in light as well, like with this whole point of the Maamor that we've been learning for a very long time, that there is already essa spherois hagnuzim, which means the idea of sphirot exist already even in the lights. However, on that stage, in the lights, they all exist in a uniform state. They don't exist at higher and lower. The whole system of up and down and higher levels and lower levels, all is only when the lights integrate in the vessels, depending on the purity of the vessels and the elevation of the vessels. That's what creates. So earlier in chapter 34, we were learning how that affects the sphirot themselves. How the light in Chachma is much stronger than the light in Bina. Bina is considered lower to Chachma. Like wisdom is higher than understanding, and so on and so forth. And when it goes to Malchutz, it becomes even lower. And we were learning that's the idea of fluctuation of why numbers are higher and lower. And it's the opposite between the numbers. If you're considering, when you say numbers, sometimes higher numbers are in higher sphirot or higher levels, and there's higher numbers on the lower sphere. So this is all based that we learned in the last chapter. In this chapter, he's applying the same concept in worlds, because from the sphirot come the worlds. And since the higher sphirot illuminate in the higher worlds, that makes those worlds higher. What does it mean higher? It means more light, less vessels. But the lower sphirot, which have thicker vessels and therefore lesser light, so those worlds created or sustained primarily by the lower sphirot have more vessels and less light, and that's why they're considered lower worlds. And in general, he says they're divided into three categories, because in the worlds that are primarily in creation is mainly three realms: Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, creation, formation, and completion. And in the human body, you see that there is also in the soul. That's what we were learning in last class, that in the soul, in the human experience, both in soul and in body, you see that there is a division between these three dimensions. There is in the soul, there is Chabad, which is the intelligence, which is the head of the soul. There is Chagas, which is the center, emotional element, structure, primary emotions. That's the center part of the soul. And then in the final sphirot are the emotions that are more relatable to action and to behavior, which is Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut, and kingship, especially kingship, which is speech and action as well. That's the lower part of the human. So there's higher and there's lower. And especially as it vests itself in the body as well, in a sense, we can say that the entire neshama is oiros, is lights, and the body is the vessels. The truth is, in the soul itself, you have the energy of the soul and the definitions of the soul. So there too, there's lights and vessels. And as well, even in the soul itself, there's a gradations between the upper part of the souls, where the vessel is very refined and more light, and the lower parts of the soul, or the lower powers of the soul, where the vessels are more pronounced, and therefore the light, the energy is quieter or less. In the body, for sure, we see it that there's three compartments: a head, and a torso, and the feet. And in the last class, we were learning that he began with the bottom, he began with the legs, that the legs are the thickest vessels, and the only power of the soul that reveals itself in the legs is the most nether, in terms of quality, the nether power of the soul, which is the power of to walk, the power of movement, but in movement itself, a chunkier power of movement, meaning a less delicate power. Walking is a very raw form of movement. It doesn't have the finesse Obviously, people can train themselves and add finesse to their way they walk, especially if you become a dancer. But that's, even in its most refined state, it does not compare to the more sophisticated powers of a human being that are in the higher parts of the body. And then you go, he says, in the torso, the midsection of the person. So over there, first of all, you have much more important organs. You have the lungs and the. By the way, this class should be a dedication for Refuah Shalem. I'm dedicating. I was going to say it right in the beginning, and I slipped my mind. And right now, I remembered. This is for a very dear friend of the entire Jewish community in Los Angeles, a person who toils more than anyone else for the betterment of every individual person over here in this community, and impacting Jews across the world in his good, boundless kindness. And right now he's going through, literally as we speak, not a heart transplant, a lung transplant. I was mentioning the lungs, so I remembered. Levi Halevi ben Leah. So may this be to the schus of his neshama, this learning. So in the midsection, he says, is the lungs and the heart, which are obviously a much higher, superior type of limb than the legs. And in that higher powers of the soul, the breathing elements are abilities of the soul, which is a more inner power of the soul, reveals itself in that part, especially if you want to go on a more spiritual level. In the physical heart is where we associate the concept of emotions, which are felt in the heart. Now, and then even on the more external limbs of the midsection of the person, which we learned in last class, for example, the two arms, even they have a higher level of soul imbued and invested in them than the legs. And even though the hands can also, you don't feel emotions in your hands. The hands are very practical and doers, just like the feet are doers. However, the doing of the feet and the doing of the hands is different. They both facilitate, the arms, the hands, and the legs facilitate the concept of the power of movement only. However, for example, which means that the power of intelligence and emotions and whatever, sight and sound and hearing and smelling and tasting and talking and thinking, all of that does not, you don't think in your hand and you don't think in your feet, and none of those powers. However, within the power of movement itself, the more sophisticated, finer elements of the power of movement is present, and it expresses itself in the hands and not in the feet. The feet has a far coarser expression of the power of movement, which what that really means is the more external, the soul's external power find expression in one's legs, and the soul's more internal powers express themselves in the midsection of the person and the torso, definitely in the heart, lungs, and inner organs, and even digestion. And but even in the outer organs of the midsection, there is also a more elevated form of life that takes place over there. And now he's going to continue on and talk about the head, which is even higher. All right? Uberoish, and that's where we're holding. Uberoish, this is the middle of chapter 35. Uberoish, and in the head, made oira nefesh, shines and illuminates the light of the soul, beribo yoiser, even more. And this is consistent with the ideas we're soon going to see, that the less vessel, the more light. The head is the we're going to get to it. The head physically is takes up the least room, the least physical space in the body is the head, and it has the most psychological and spiritual life force is in the head. And the midsection is still smaller than the if you take a ruler and you'll measure from your neck to your beginning of your feet, you'll find that it's less than the legs. The legs is half the body. So, and that's, so you see that part, even the midsection, even though it's bigger than the head, it's bigger than the head because it has more vessels than the head, and therefore it has a lesser quality of life than in the head, because the most sophisticated and powerful powers of a human take place in the head, not in the other, even not in the midsection, and definitely not in the legs. Okay. The Agam, and but now he's going to ask a question. He's going to question this idea that the most the most or more potent and powerful force of life is in the head, which means primarily in the brain, and in the midsection is a lesser quality, and finally the legs is least, he's going to question that regarding one organ in particular, the heart. How do we see the brain and the heart in terms of the two vital organs? One cannot be without the other, without the other organs. Now, you can't be with other important organs also, like liver, or you can't be without your lungs. But still, the heart, and in terms of the general power of life, the most important powers that are life-giving to a human being, where life takes place, is in the brain and in the heart. Those are obviously the two king organs of the person. Now, one can argue, and he's going to ask the question, maybe it seems like when it comes to the actual living itself, you can't give superiority to the brain over the heart. Both of them are as important. And what are we saying? That no, the highest levels of soul are in the brain, are in the head, and not in the midsection. Now, Hagamen, even though the Be'etzem Chayes HaNefesh, in the essence of the life force of the soul, Harosh V'Alev Shav, in the heart and the head and the heart are equal. The brain, which is the root of all consciousness and the root of all the nerve system and all of that, all directed by the brain. And the heart, which pumps blood, which is the life of the person. Both of them are absolutely the managers and the distributors of life in the human being. And it seems to be equal in quality. So he says, true. In life itself, they will both score equally as absolutely pivotal. And as we said earlier, they're both the king of the body. However, when it comes to not the life itself, that they carry the power of life, but when it comes to particular functions of the human being, the head is superior than the heart. What is that? Because you don't have intelligence in your heart, but you do have intelligence in your brain. You also don't have vision in your heart, and you don't have sight in your heart, and that all takes place in at least, even though you don't have vision in the brain, you have vision in your eyes, which then gets obviously processed in the brain. But at least in the head, you have all those powers, and when you don't have that in the heart. In power, it's not the same. In the head, Giloi is the revelation of Amochin, of the intelligence, and all the higher sensor, they're all close to the brain: the mouth, the nose, the ears, the eyes. And even if you say that then it's not brain literally, but it's very plugged in directly into the brain, and all their information that they're taking in, all their sensories are immediately being processed in the brain. So that happens there, but not on the heart. Like sight, ushmiya, and hearing. So the main primary revelation of the light of the soul is in the head. The ikar, and in the head itself, in the brain, that's in the head, which takes up very little room. The brain itself, it's the most important, but it is the least physical, which means the least spacey. Today we're finding that they're able to put in the most powerful things in very small little containers. This is the idea. The Indian Reusa Daliba, but he's going to ask one more question. Well, isn't there, in a sense, an advantage to the heart over the head? He's going to find something that in the heart is. In human life, we maybe can find this as well, that the deepest connection you can have with a human being on a deep level is through your heart. And so you see that life can be far more intense in the heart than through the brain. Intelligence is good and powerful, but there's a certain mellowness to it. When it comes to the heart and the bond you have with your child, the bond you have with someone you are in love with, and that's deeply coming from the heart, and that. So that, in a sense, you can say that the heart has a quality of life that's higher than the head. So that seems to contradict what we're saying earlier. This is a koach, a power, which is, we'll soon see if it's a power. We'll get to that in a moment. But especially when it comes to divine service, meaning our powers as we are using them to serve God, over there for sure, this idea that there is a greatness to the heart is very is something which is more noticeable, and that is what the Zohar says. The Zohar makes a very powerful statement. The Zohar says that there is no thought that can grasp God. That means if you want to intellectualize God, you'll fall short. There's no thought ever, no matter how brilliant you are, you can't wrap your mind around God, because God is infinite. Therefore, He's not. The mind cannot take God. So the Zohar says, good. So that means that we can't grasp Him. The Zohar says you could grasp Him. You can grasp Him in the desire of the heart. The desire of the heart latches on to God. That means God is elusive to any mind, but He's not elusive to the yearning of the heart. The yearning of the soul, the yearning of the heart does latch itself onto God Himself, to the infinite. So what do we see from here? That there's, of course, an experience in the heart that far surpasses the mind. So why is it that we are saying that seems to go against the notion that we were talking earlier, that the brain is the highest power in the human being? So he's going to answer that on two answers. There's two answers to explain why that does not contradict what we're saying, that the brain is higher. Number one, first answer is, in order to experience this desire of the heart, it's the brain that needs to trigger it. What does that mean? There is that level of the desire of the heart that is kind of opens up. The heart opens up from such a deep place within the person, but the force that pries the heart open is a form of meditation, and the meditation takes place in the intelligence in the mind. However, this type of an intelligence is a very, very, very unique intelligence. This type of meditation, which is meaning using your intellect, is using it in a very specific way. In other words, usually when you use your mind to explore and to get to know whatever we're able to know of God, which excites the heart, as King David says to Shlomo, to his son King Solomon, Shlomo Melech, das Elokei Avicha, know the God of your father, v'avdeu b'leiv shalom, and serve Him with a complete heart. So you see the way to the heart, or it says in the Torah also, you should know today, and then you will take it to your heart, which means the way to the heart is through the mind, through proper meditation, study, and knowledge, and connection, which happens in the head. You can then feel God in your heart. However, when we're talking about over here, the unique yearning that we're talking about over here is when a person is not yearning to something specific about God, but they're yearning for God Himself. Now, that type of meditation means that you can't meditate on what you can understand. You have to meditate on what is beyond understanding. That means, but you still have to meditate. If you can't understand, doesn't mean you can't seek it in your mind. What that means, that the meditation is not a meditation in the definitions of God, in the divine expressions, but rather you think about the awesomeness of all the emanations coming from God, and then the deep meditation is that God is above that all, and you're meditating deeply in the abstraction of how He's not any of these things, how He's above and beyond, and that touch in the heart, and because you can't define it, the heart, the deepest, and being that the soul comes from that place, so that's wakens the neshama to yearn to break free from any definition, from anything known, and to reach for the absolute unknown, which is the essence of the Ein Sof. But what do you see from here? That the heart relies on the mind. The heart can't experience that powerful experience of Re'usa Deliba without the head. So you can't really dismiss the head and say that the heart is more powerful. They're both partners in this, in a sense. When you're meditating, the meditation is in the Or Ein Sof, in the infinite light that is above the entire progressive order. Stated elsewhere. But that's one idea. So over here, the explanation is still within the realm that where we're measuring the greatness of one power over the other power, and finding how even in this, what would seem to be the heart's the heart's superiority, the heart can't do it without the mind. But now he's going to answer even a deeper answer. Based on the second idea, that there is and because it's not just another idea, it's a different type of yearning of heart. Sometimes the yearning of heart is not triggered by the mind at all. Sometimes it's just triggered maybe by some kind of a powerful thing that a person goes through and shakes them to their core, and their heart breaks open and the deepest yearning of their soul comes out. And like a lot of time, it's not through meditation. Like you can feel on Yom Kippur, you can feel it Rosh Hashanah, you can feel it where all your soul bursts open from the deepest point, and it's like a powerful desire, just I want to be with you, God. And it was not led through, it wasn't premeditated. See, what he's talking about earlier is a person says, I want to come to that place. Let me see how I can meditate, a person starts praying, and their goal is to reach this yearning of the heart. But here we're talking about more of a spontaneous thing. There's sometimes an opening of the heart, a yearning of the heart. It's not through contemplation. It's coming from the very essence of who you are and the essence of life, or the essence of the soul that is opening itself up in the heart. And the mind can't facilitate it. The heart is the way for this. In other words, it can't express itself through knowledge, through an understanding of something. It has to express itself through an infinite yearning, through a rapture of a yearning. Usually would come in an enormous, powerful, emotional outburst, but it's more than emotion. It's the essence exposed. It's going to express itself in deep sobbing or something like that. So, or maybe sometimes in an explosive joy that doesn't even have any limitations. But he says, so that the heart does it without the mind. And that would seem that the heart is higher than the mind. That's really, in that moment, you're engaging with God himself, which the mind remains light years and light years and light years away from that experience. So over here, the heart far outdid the head. But he explains, it doesn't contradict what we're saying earlier, that the order of, there's a hierarchy, and the higher powers reveal themselves in the brain and the lower powers go into the heart. Because this experience doesn't count. Because this experience is not an experience, he says, of a certain power of your soul. It's the essence. And when we're saying, the whole idea we spoke earlier, that the human being is set up in a system where the vessels facilitate the lights, and the more refined vessels are higher up in the body, and the coarser vessels are lower down in the body, and commensurate to that will be the light, or compatible with that will be the lights. That's true regarding all the powers of the soul, the kochot hanefesh. And that's usually what reveals itself in the body. The soul as it is in its essence is generally not meant to reveal itself in the body unless there is an extraordinary moment in a person's life. And that extraordinary moment is the revelation of who you are at your essence of being. And it's not an emotion. It's not an external experience. It's the very self itself. It's your very spark of God gushing forth of the soul. Gilui etzema. And that's not the kochos and nefesh. So that's kind of that experience is not at all the subject matter that we're talking about over here. Why when that happens, does it feel more comfortable going in the heart than in the mind? It's because the heart can let it be infinite. In a yearning, you can yearn for infinity. But in the mind, being that it needs to grasp, it needs to take, so the mind cannot the soul itself cannot appear in the head. It can appear in the heart, but not because the heart is a vessel. It's not really a vessel for it. It's just a moment. It's almost like all vessels are shoved aside and it's the soul just coming out. And just where does it drill the hole? It drills the hole for it to break out. Where does it take its sledgehammer and break out from the limited experience of the human? It breaks open. It cracks it open in the heart. because the heart is more crackable than the brain. Let's put it that way. But it's not like one of the like regular experiences where soul and body interact with each other. It's over here. It's almost like there's no body. There's just pure outburst of the soul. It happens to be that it's taking place in the heart, as he says. This is the deepest point of the soul. This is not the power of the person. It's not one of the kochos hanefesh. And we know that the very, very quintessence of the soul, which part of the body does it like? Is it attached to? It's the heart. But it's higher than powers. When it comes to the evolution of the powers of the soul into the body, that begins with the head and moves downward. When it comes to the powers of the soul, the main revelation of the light of the soul, is in the head. And that's when we're talking about intelligence and ordinary emotions and all the other powers. And that works its way that the 1,000 watts happen in the head, 100 watts happen in the heart, and the lower wattage goes in the different parts of the body. So now he says, so the head has got the most intense revelation, deepest powers. Not intense, intense, but we spoke about something much more intense right now, but meaning in general, the greatest download of soul capabilities is in the head. But in terms of physical space, the head takes up the least. On your bed, when you go to sleep at night, your head occupies the least space. A little pillow. The rest of the body has the rest of the mattress. And when it comes to the vessels and the limbs of the body, the head, is the smallest part of the body. And the part of the body, guf over here again, as we discussed yesterday, means the midsection of the person is bigger than the head, but smaller than the legs. And the legs are the largest. So what do you see? The kochos hanefesh, that's more spiritual. That's called or. The physical body is vessel. And what do we see? The bigger the vessels, the less the energy. And when it comes to kelim and vessels, the feet has a lot of vessel. Beriboy kelim has a lot of vessel. Much more than the head. But when it comes to wattage of soul, sophisticated lights of the soul, nefesh, soul, there's much more giloi hanefesh, revelation of soul, in the head than in the torso than there is in the legs. And in light, in the head made oir hanefesh beriboy. The light of the soul shines in abundance. And it comes in the body. Mismat, or the or gets less. And the feet, it even becomes more diminished. And the same as also what Dugma Lamaila is the example above. Begimel Olamot in the three worlds. Now he's going to apply the same idea that is in the human body. He's going to apply it to the upper realms. The Ba'olam Abriya, the world creation. Let's look at the sum totality of all of creation as one big human being. The first world, which is the world of souls, not even, and some angels, but it's a very, very high celestial world. That world is, in general, compared to the head of this enormous body called creation. The second world, called the world of formation, which is a world of angels, the primary residence of angels, is called Olam HaYetzirah. That is the correspondent to in the body as the midsection. And our physical world, Olam HaAsiyah, that is the world of completion, the world of physicality. That's considered the legs, as he's going to explain now. And there we'll see the same thing. There's much less divine revelation and godly and powerful revelation in the physical world than there is in the higher realms. In the three worlds, the Ba'olam HaBriya, in the world of Briya, there's much more light there. And the reason there's so much illuminance in that world, since the world of Briya is the beginning of existence, so it's a very subtle it's a very subtle material. The material of the world of Bria is so close to the non-material energies of God that existed before the world, before he creates the first matter. So the matter of that world is hardy matter. It's such abstract matter. And therefore, the vessels made up of that are very not pronounced, very silent, very benign, very hidden. But there is therefore tremendous amount of interaction with the light, much more light. It's the first substance, the first being, the first existence that is created from the divine, which is the divine he calls nothingness because it's beyond a defined existence. So Meir Shamadayin Giluya Ayin. So in that world, there's still a lot of the original nothingness shining there. Whoever listens to Maayon Mashiach daily WhatsApp classes, in those classes, this is literally the subject now, as we're talking how in Moshe Rabbeinu and Chanoch and their neshamas were plugged in, are into this level, and therefore they are so nullified because they're so close to the original oneness. There he's talking on a higher level, Chachma, but this is the general idea. So that in the Olam Abriya, we're still very close to the pre-existence. So the existence itself feels the pre-existence to a very big degree. And therefore, the vessels are hardly seen over there. There's not much vessel because there's not much substance, but there's a lot of energy. But precisely because of that, to us creatures in this world, we cannot fathom that world. We can't know it. We can't see it. We can't interact with it. And that world is called darkness. It has so much light, but it's dark. Because for us to be able to see something, we need to see it through some kind of definition, through some kind of vessel. And that world doesn't have much definitions. And because of that, to us, it's utterly dark. It's like a teacher that is so beyond you and that gives this cryptic statement, but because they use so little words, you have no idea what it says. So it's dark. If you opened up just randomly a page of the writings of the Ari and try to make heads and tails of what he's saying over there, it's very few words. It's just Kabbalistic words, but there's very few words. There's tremendous content to every section. And it means nothing. It's darkness. It's utter. That's not illumination. It's darkness. Unless you're learning it from a teacher and you have a whole introductions and you begin to decodify and demystify those words. It's called darkness. And that's why that world of Bria, Nekra Choshech, is darkness. Like it says, Yotzer Or, he forms light, Ubore Choshech, he creates darkness. So this is a proof that he says that when it says God creates darkness, this is referring to the world of Bria that is called creation, and it's dark. It's not dark. It's brighter than any light we've ever, we can even begin to imagine. But to us, it's dark because we need words. We need vessels to understand it. And since there's no words over here, or there's no vessels over here, or very little vessels, or the vessels are there, but they're so subtle, and when therefore they're not pronounced, it was just pure, and the energy is there without the vessels. To us, it's dark. Bria, because in the world of Bria, Meir Gilior, there's such illumination of light. So it's dark. The helm and concealment to the lower worlds, the Yetzirah. However, the world of Yetzirah, which is already the second stage, where these subtle matter of the world of Bria begins to form itself more into substantial form. And therefore, what happens, the light becomes more obscured by the vessel. So the light becomes diminished. The vessels start taking on more of a substantial existence. So the light becomes way dimmer. The energy becomes way less than in the world of Bria. Yet to us looking at it, if a human being from our world will gain access into the world of Bria, over there you can see already. So that's luminous. There's not that much light. The very darkening of the light itself makes it become bright to us. Or that's called light, the Gilui and revelation, to the lower world. So you see how the light diminishes from Atzilus to Bria. Sorry, not from Atzilus to Bria, from Bria to Yetzirah, from creation to formation. But on the other hand, when it comes to vessels, the opposite. In Bria, the vessels are very few, meaning very unpronounced and very hidden, as we said earlier. And that's why there's mainly souls over there, because souls are not that vessel-y. Angels have vessels; they can't exist in that world because their vessels are too thick. But Yetzirah, the lower world, the world of the air, has a lot of vessels. When it comes to the vessels, well, the opposite. The Bria who Bria, in the world of creation, there's very few vessels. And in the world of Yetzirah, abundance of vessels. And as it is known, okay, let's stop over here because we're getting already over time. We'll continue.